All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 40th online Spintronics seminar. Thank you for joining us. It's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker today. Professor Dmytro Bozhko got his bachelor's and master's degree from Taras Shevchenko in National University of Kiev, Ukraine. He then received his PhD degree in TU Kaiserslautern, Germany in 2017. After a year as a postdoc at TU Kaiserslautern, he joined University of Glasgow as a Theodor Research Fellow. In 2019, he became an assistant professor at University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. And he's currently setting up his lab. From our conversation earlier, he's already have the Brillouin light scattering and micro BLS ready for his experiment. So without further ado, Dmytro, please take it from here.
Yeah, thank you, Xims. Thank you very much for a kind introduction. Yeah, I would like to thank a lot for inviting me to give this talk online at Spintronics seminar. That's quite new experience for me to deliver the talks fully online like this without seeing all the audience, but I'll try my best. So welcome, and today I'm gonna talk about spin currents and some exotic kind of spin currents. There are many applications right now which utilize spin degree of freedom. And I would like to tell you today about a very general effect, which is not bound to the specific material, which will be yttrium manganese for this talk, but it's a rather general effect. And that effect happens when we magnetize our samples obliquely, so when we break the symmetry in the system. So spin currents, they can be made in different ways. They can be made by just spin transfer torque. They can be made by spin Hall effect. They can be driven by thermal gradient, or they can be excited just directly. That's probably one of the most known examples of spin currents that's just driven by spin wave, which we excite by microwave field, or they can be excited optically, and they can be also phase driven. So we can have the spin currents induced in the magnon condensate, so-called magnon supercurrents. But in this talk, the main focus will be on the new type of spin currents, which are unidirectional. They are transverse. I will explain that what that is in just in a minute. And they can be excited in ferromagnetic films if the symmetry is broken. And that's breaking of the symmetry is not necessarily due to some non-reciprocal interactions like Zoloshinsky-Maria ones. So for this purpose, I can just tell you, just running a bit forward, that's just what's enough, that's just to tilt magnetization a bit out of plane. So, but let me introduce a bit the ferromagnetic materials and what are the spin waves actually are. So in ferromagnetic materials, atoms, they have unpaired electrons and they possess magnetic moment. These moments are aligned along the bias magnetic field, and due to the exchange interaction and external magnetic field, they form macroscopic magnetic moment, which, if turned from its equilibrium position along the effective magnetic field, that start to precess. And because we have not only the just singular spins, we have interactions between them, between neighbors, exchange interaction, or long-range dipolar interactions. Those interactions produces us waves. So that elementary excitation precession is not staying at the same spot. It propagates in the form of a wave called spin wave. So all the properties of these waves, they can be described by so-called Landau-Lifshitz-Gilbert equation. This equation couples the magnetization dynamics in time as a function of effective magnetic field and magnetization vector. So the effective magnetic field effectively describes all the interactions. It contains dipole-dipole interaction, exchange interaction, it contains anisotropies, Zelshinsky-Murray interaction terms, and so on, so on. The what's important thing here, that dipole-dipole interaction, which is here, it's highly anisotropic in relation to the propagation direction. So if you propagate along the field or perpendicular to the field, we'll have rather different wave properties. And I would like to stress that here, it's very important for this, for understanding of what's happening in our system, which I will introduce you in a moment. So talking about spin waves, they can't live without medium, without a ferromagnet. And our material of choice for experimental studies here, that's yttrium iron garnet. That is a room temperature ferromagnet. Although it is a ferrimagnet, technically at low frequencies below 1 terahertz, it can be considered as a very good ferromagnet with Curie temperature way above the room temperature. It has nice cubic crystal structure. Just to give you just a sense of crystal quality, this material has phonon damping as low as one of the quartz. So its growth procedure has been developed very well. So, and because of its unique crystalline structure and iron 3+ ions in it, it has longest known spin wave lifetime, which is up to 700 nanoseconds. And among other materials like popular nowadays alloys like permalloy, cobalt, iron boron, or Heuslers, they are still outsiders if compared to YIG in terms of damping. For this reason, YIG became a pretty popular material for nowadays Spintronics applications, although that's not always very well compatible with CMOS technology, but there are lots of studies done and a lot of efforts to bring that to be compatible right now. So if we solve carefully the Landau-Lifshitz equation, which I just introduced to you a moment ago, the spin wave spectrum of yttrium iron garnet film can be found. So here is a frequency versus wave number. And it can be found that in respect to the different orientation of the wave propagation, which is depicted here by this magenta arrow Q, and respect to the external biased magnetic field direction, H0, here, in respect to that directions, we can define for common magnetization directions in plane and out of plane, 3 distinct spectra. So if we magnetize it in plane, we can have backward volume spin waves, or we can have surface spin waves there. But if we magnetize completely out of plane, like here, so we can have forward volume spin waves. So as you can see, the spectrum is really highly anisotropic. And so far, those 3 configurations were main for all the studies. So we can find majority of studies done only for these 3 particular configurations. And the intermediate magnetization conditions in between the out of plane and in plane, they were terra incognita for experimentalists, especially in the case of very high wave vectors, because very short wavelengths, they are hard to investigate using conventional electromagnetic techniques. To pick up it with antenna, we need to shrink the antenna to very small dimensions. But that's not a problem for optical techniques. So, okay, from just to give you like a sort of a thought about what to expect. So if we just think about continuity transformation between the in-plane and out-of-plane configurations, we can expect that our spectrum should fall somewhere in this area between backward volume, for instance, and forward volume spin waves. So, and the main question of this part of my talk is what happens, what kind of new physics we can expect from these waves in between the forward volume and the backward volume. So, in order to study this system, we use optical technique, brilliant light scattering spectroscopy. This techniques allows us to elastically scatter photons of our laser, in this case green laser, 532 nanometers, on a magnon, that's a quanta of spin wave. And in the process of scattering, we have, of course, energy and momentum conserved. So, and then by analysis of the scattered light frequency, we can have nice picture of the spin waves frequency at the particular point of our sample. So the specifics of this of the observation is the following, that we have very high finesse interferometer, which can resolve spin waves on the frequency window of around 100 megahertz. That frequency window is small compared to the frequency of the laser light, but unfortunately that's not small enough to resolve individual frequency points on our dispersion. As you can see, for backward volume, the dispersion is rather shallow. So basically every point in this dispersion falls into the frequency resolution window. Thus, we need to somehow resolve the other degree of freedom here, the wave vector of light, because that's also conserved. So, and that we do with Wavenumber resolution. By doing that, we can map the dispersion nicely. So how we do that? The main principle is just the momentum conservation, and the fact that because of the momentum conservation, our scattered light will be having particular direction in respect to the orientation of the sample and incidence angle of the laser light. So if we shine the laser light onto our sample like this, these photons will scatter on the spin wave, which is depicted here as a wave front here. That forms a sort of a diffractional grating on which that light will scatter. And if we consider particular scattering geometry, if we want our scattered light to be collected only when it's propagating right backwards to the incoming light, that geometry will require some metallic or dielectric mirror to reverse the direction of the scattered light, because after scattering it will go right through the sample. So to scatter it back, we need some dielectric mirror on the back. But using that back scattering geometry, we can fix the wave vector of the probed spin wave with respect to the wave number of the light and the angle of incidence. In that way, by just changing the angle of incidence, we can map every single point on the dispersion. So, and that is done in experiment while we are just changing the incidence angle of the laser light. And that we do by the system of prisms, which redirect the probing light, and that allows us to rotate the laser light beam around the sample while keeping the probing spot the same at the surface of the sample. In that way, we can achieve maximum Wavenumber resolution, which is given by the Wavenumber of the laser light. It's 23 inverse microns, and Wavenumber resolution of about 1% of that value. And I should note that this this picture here and that bar, which represents wave number resolution, frequency resolution, that they are pretty much in scale. So you can see that the box of intersection between wave number and frequency resolutions, that's pretty small compared to the dispersion curvature here. So basically we can nicely map our dispersion. So let me switch to that what we actually see in our experiment. So right here, we have the brilliant light scattering frequency versus wave number, and intensity of this graph that represents the number of magnons detected. So number of scattered photons, which are proportional to the number of magnons in that particular state. I would like to stress here that what we see here, that's a thermally populated spectrum. No external signals are applied to the system, besides of the just finite room temperature. So what we see here, we magnetize, by the way, the sample just in conventional, in plane geometry of backward volume waves. So, and probe the wave vectors which are along the bias magnetic field. So what we can see here, first of all, the two steep straight lines. Those correspond to transversal phonon dispersions. We do not see longitudinal phonon dispersions just because our scattering and detection geometry is utilizing polarizers in this circuit, and thus our detection is polarizing sensitive. So longitudinal phonons does not rotate polarization as magnons and transversal phonons do. So, but we are mainly interested now in magnetic dispersion, which is obviously this one. So that already resembles some fundamental magnon mode. However, in order to actually prove that that's a magnon mode and it's fundamental mode, we need to do some calculations. So we consider, for our theory, we consider infinite ferromagnetic film of finite thickness L, and spin waves propagate in plane. Due to the demagnetization field, if we try to magnetize it out of plane, the magnetization will not follow the direction of the bias magnetic field and will be sticking somehow in between the in-plane and the direction of the bias magnetic field. So we can find that equilibrium angle of magnetization by just solving Landau-Lifshitz equation in the static case. That's here. In order to find the dynamics, we need to rewrite the Landau-Lifshitz equation using the Maxwell's equations. We need to decompose the whole system of the waves into the system of plane waves, just sine cosine waves with some distribution along the thickness of the film. And then our equations will turn into an integral differential equation of such a form, where m small, that's a mode structure of the spin wave along the thickness. So that structure for unpinned surface spins, that can be selected as a system of orthogonal functions. In our case, that's cosine functions. So if we substitute this mode structure into integral differential equation here, we will get that equation simplified into the form of pretty much infinite series of equations for eigenvalues. So we can truncate that equation somewhere where the tolerance for frequencies will be reached, and we can find the eigenvalues and eigenvectors of this equation and obtain the dispersion of the waves, as well as automatically with that we'll get the mode profiles of our waves. So, and if we plot that dispersion calculated using these equations, we can find that our dispersion, what we see with brilliant light scattering right now, that follows the fundamental mode, the zeros mode of thickness mode of backward volume waves. The calculations, however, shows that we have not only the fundamental mode in the spectrum, but we have a lot of thickness modes with different thickness distribution. But we don't see them. So the question is why? And in order to answer this question, we need to look into their distribution along the thickness. So in calculations, we found mode profile as a sum of orthogonal series of cosine functions. So, and we can see that if we look at the fundamental mode, that distribution, if we go along the dispersion branch and increase the Wavenumber, it just changes from perfectly uniform to quasi-uniform distribution. But the common thing here is that that distribution is rather uniform. However, for the higher order modes, we have very non-uniform distribution. So in our brilliant light scattering geometry, the specific is such that we see only the waves with a uniform or quasi-uniform distribution over the thickness. That can be understood just very simply. As we are scattering on the wavefront is for our uniform waves, that's uniform along the thickness, but for non-uniform distribution, that's pretty much has a lot of variations, and that scatters the light just simply in different direction. So for our backscattering geometry, we require the uniformity of the distribution of the spin wave to be detected. So if we just take this mode structure and take from there the uniformity of that profile, basically we take just zero component of this series, and we can just plot that as a function of Wavenumber frequency, and basically we can derive from the theory what we expect to see from our brilliant light scattering experiment. So we can see the uniformity spin wave spectrum in the map here. And as you can see, that follows nicely what we see. So pretty much the uniformity, if summarizing, the uniformity of the spin wave profile, that's our brilliant light scattering detection efficiency in this case. So, okay, that's what's it about just conventional in plane case. What happens when we go to oblique magnetization? In order to do that, experimentally, we just tilt our sample inside of the magnet like this, and the probing scheme remains exactly the same. So let's tilt our magnetization just a bit. And immediately we see that we got some interesting effect. So instead of just one single dispersion branch here, we start to see some split, and we start to see the broadening of the spectrum. So another effect which you can notice here, that's the dispersion lowers down by frequency. So our lowest frequency here was around 7.5 gigahertz. Now it's below 7 gigahertz. That's because the magnetization field, as we keep magnetic field constant, the internal field, when we tilt magnetization out of plane, it decreases. So thus we have lower frequency. So, and if we just put here the straight calculated dispersions of the spin waves, we can see that this dispersion does not quite follow the experiment already. So, but if we put the homogeneity of the spin wave distribution into account, you see that we got perfect correspondence. So surprisingly, what we can say here that is higher modes have better visibility in the experiment already. And I will show you exactly why that occurs just in a moment. Let me escalate the case here and tilt the magnetization further. So if we tilt that further, we see that the dispersion shifts down and blurs even more, and the deviation from the calculated spectrum is getting worse and worse. So, but still, when we have our uniformity calculation implemented, we can still resemble the experiment. And when we go finally to some angle around 40 degrees, so that's particularly right in the middle between forward volume and backward volume cases, we start to see that that the dispersion has really nothing to that what we see has really nothing to do with the fundamental modes calculated here. Again, it has a very nice correspondence if we take into account the visibility of the brilliant light scattering spectrum. So, but the question here, why that higher order modes here, they have better visibility in our experiment, why they have more uniformity, how they get that more uniformity in the in their distribution than the fundamental mode. So in order to answer this question, let's have a look. Since we have in our calculation, we have that access to the uniformity, to the mode profiles. So and if we go along the lowest mode, we can see that the distribution of the mode is not anymore having the uniform distribution as we increase the wave number. It turns to be very non-uniform as we go into the higher wave vectors. So what we see here that finally at high wave vectors, the distribution is very non-uniform. So, and obviously that prevents us from seeing that, because the uniformity is pretty much zero in this case. However, if we turn to the higher number mode, like 21, we'll see that at the beginning, when the wave vector is 0, the mode has pretty much the same profile as before, so it's rather non-uniform and thus non-visible. But as we go further with wave vector to the higher radius, we see that the mode profile starts to be crazy, non-sinusoidal, really non-uniform, and it has nothing to do with that what we've seen before. And finally, when we see that mode at the higher wave vector here, then we see that its mode profile suddenly becomes very quasi-uniform. So thus, that becomes visible. So what we can see here, we can just call it wavelength-dependent mode transformation. So just in case if you are curious what happens next, if you tilt magnetization further out of plane, what happens is we still see something, we still see the dispersion, we still have perfect correspondence, but when we go to completely out of plane case, we stop seeing the dispersion, because for perfect out of plane geometry we see nothing, because of the BLS cross-section becomes 0. Well, if we do calculations, that's how the spectrum for that waves looks like. That's what we should have seen if the cross-section wouldn't be zero. Okay, so right now, so how we can understand these profiles which we calculated and that what we confirmed experimentally. So in order to understand these profiles, we need to look into the basic spin wave dispersion, which is described by Kittel's equation. So classical Kittel's equation doesn't have the exchange in it, but we can introduce that in it right here. Since we have infinite ferromagnet for the moment, that produces us just very nice reciprocal changing frequency with a function of a wave vector here, Q. Where total wave vector here, Q is just for this. For the purpose of this calculation, I just split it up into two components: along the film plane and out of the film plane, kappa. So we just consider such a geometry first. So let's consider first when magnetization is in plane and along the propagation direction. So if you plot the Kittel's equation just as it is, this sine theta will be 0 here. So we'll have now very nice parabolic dispersion if we plot that dispersion as a function of kappa here. So what I should say here now, that if we consider the wave which propagates along the film in plane, that wave to be the eigen function of this slab, that needs to have two components, two waves, with a perpendicular wave vector kappa 1 and kappa 2, to propagating in both directions. That's a dispersion of those waves which we plot here. And these waves, when they are combined, they form the standing wave along the thickness of the film, and that ensures that we do not have any transfer of energy along the thickness of the film, because we have standing wave. It's not bringing any energy towards any sides of the film, so the energy flows are just equal. But in the same way, that produces us the wave which propagates along the field and produces energy flow along. But what if we change the direction of magnetization to some equilibrium position, to some out of plane configuration? So in that case, if you look into a Kittel's equation, the minimal frequency at which spin waves will propagate, that will be not at kappa equals 0 anymore. It will correspond to some non-zero kappa here, and because of that, the whole dispersion just shifts like this. And now, at particular frequency, omega, for which we need to form a standing wave along the film, we have two different wave numbers, kappa 1 and kappa 2, for that particular frequency. And that's in contrast to the case when we have in plane magnetization, those kappas are not equal. One is smaller, one is significantly larger. And that produces us the following pattern along the film thickness. The wave number here, one is almost uniform, another one will be highly non-uniform wave along the film normal, and the resulting wave will have significant uniform component, but it will also oscillate like this. And as you can see now, that's not really looking like a standing wave. That's already a sort of a traveling wave here. So and that already brings us some ideas about that those waves can actually carry something along the film normal. So, but before we go into deeply into that considerations, let me show you how those mode profiles for the waves look like in dynamics. That's what we actually see in the experiment. So for the case of in-plane magnetization, we have nicely standing waves which oscillate in time like this. For the lowest mode, that's uniform distribution. For the higher order mode, that's non-uniform distribution. There is a standing wave, and obviously there is no transport effect happening along the film normal. However, if we turn into oblique magnetization case like this, and we plot for exactly the same mode numbers, we plot that calculated mode profiles in time, we see that surprisingly, those modes start to noticeably propagate along the field normal. So those waves have some traveling component. So it already brings us to the idea that those waves, although they are still like having two components which propagate in both directions along the film normal, but because of their traveling nature right now, different wave vectors, they can transfer some spin along the thickness. So, and in order to find that, we need to write a couple of more equations. So we can actually write the density of the spin angular momentum, basically the spin density as dynamic spin density as the following. So that would be proportional to the dynamic component of magnetization M here. For in general case, we can just plug it into the Landau-Lifshitz equation and transform it into this particular form. The derivative of the spin angular momentum plus some divergence of the spin current, exchange spin current, and which is equal to some dipolar term. So in general form, the dipolar term Q here, it can't be written as the divergence of certain vector function. So as you can see from this equation, it can't be written in that form. So this prohibits us from saying that we can describe the system as just combination of exchange spin current and dipolar spin current. So that's prohibited. That can't be written like this. Physically, what is happening in our system, that dipolar interaction, it couples the spin and the space degree of freedom for the lattice of the magnetic body. And the term Q, the dipolar term here, that describes the transfer of angular momentum between the mechanical subsystem and the spin subsystem. So when one is interested only in magnetic dynamics, the dipolar interaction, it should be just described as a spin source or sink term Q here in this form. Since the total angular momentum, which consists of this dipolar term plus the exchange term, so divergence of exchange spin current, the total angular momentum is conserved. A similar sink and source term like Q will appear in the equation for the mechanical angular momentum of the sample, pretty much like that with a negative sign on the right side. So basically, and that can be in principle measured experimentally. So, and there were a couple of experiments already done detecting the mechanical degree of freedom when we launch the spin wave along the, in this case, Yig slab. We can detect the twist or movement of that slab. So there were a couple of experiments detecting that. So, and another way to detect that's fully electrical, conventional detection. If we put on top of our sample just a piece of heavy metal, just film of platinum, for instance, with a high spin Hall effect efficiency, we can get some spins transferred to the adjacent platinum stripe and detect that as electric signal. And that, what we detect with platinum, will be not corresponding to the dipolar term, which is corresponds just to mechanical twist of our sample, but what we'll detect, that's exchange part of that, exchange spin current part. So, of course, I should say now that in any stationary situation, for example, if you have just propagation of a plane wave, the spin density is rather constant if you have just plane in continuous wave. And the exchange and dipolar contributions will compensate each other. But this compensation, however, is in general is non-local. So, and does not exclude the observable spin current effects, like here, detection of spin wave with the platinum stripe on top. So, if we would consider the film with spin sinks on top, of course, we can detect the total spin angular momentum of the system. It will not be constant anymore. It will sink into that film. So for the conventional detection, the exchange spin current, we can actually, from the theory, we can write it down in the following form. And we can actually calculate that for every mode which we have in our system. And we can actually calculate here the spin current versus wave number and versus internal magnetization angle. So basically how much the external magnetization is tilted from its equilibrium, well, from its in plane direction. And for this plot here, I have plotted that only for the mode which has quasi-uniform distribution, which is visible in our experiment. And I should say that that will be the wave which is most likely to be excited by an antenna which might be placed on top of our sample. So here we have internal magnetization angle. Here we can also plot the bias magnetic field angle, which differs from the magnetization angle, of course. And what we can see here, that the spin current has particular maximum along the wave number at some particular magnetization angle. So, and that means that our spin current exists along the film normal. So we have unidirectional current which flows across the film, and that brings us some angular momentum from one surface of the film to another one. So these modes, which we consider, they are carrying spin angular momentum. And if we consider just an experiment where we can detect that, so we can actually excite some waves with an antenna on top of our sample. Of course, we need to magnetize that sample out of plane a bit at some oblique angle. And if we just consider just a wave which propagates only in one direction, and that we can obviously, we can excite that with just antenna. It has been known for decades. that possibility that we can excite that waves. So every single wave which will be excited like this, there will have some portion of spin current, which will be carried from one surface to another. And if we will place a spin sink on one of the surfaces of the film, we will see the difference between the spin for the wave which propagates in one direction and another direction. Or if we put spin sinks on both surfaces, we'll see that one spin sink will act actually as a source of spin, so it will be drained of spins, and another surface will be a spin sink for that. So we'll see the difference. And actually, I should say that this work, as soon as we published that on arXiv, that already attracted some attention, and Göning and his colleagues calculated a pretty similar system. They suggested pretty much the same system independently, and done calculations and showed that that's indeed possible. They solved the equations exactly and found that this effect exists. So the breaking of the symmetry actually produces us a unidirectional spin current, which in general, it transfers angular momentum from one surface of the sample to another. But because that wave is formed by the two components, one with wave number down, one with a wave number pointing in another direction, but their group velocities are in opposite directions. Their energy transfer is actually compensated. Thus, we have only transport of angular momentum along the thickness. So as a bit of an outlook, so this effect we can expect from any material, from any thickness of the film. So if you do experiment for the ultra thin film, we can still see the dispersion. Of course, for ultra thin films, we need to change the wavelengths of our laser light to detect that more efficiently. That's all details. However, we still can see that, and we can still do exactly the same thing, and we can calculate the spin current for this case, and we can find that in this case, spin current will be exactly appearing at some non-zero oblique angles of magnetization. However, for the thinner films, that is expected at significantly higher wave vectors. So you can notice here that that's already much higher. That's 10 times higher than in the case of thick 5-micron thick film here. So that brings me to the conclusions of this work. So what I've demonstrated to you that if we consider oblique magnetized film of any ferromagnet, we should expect that the mode profiles are quasi-traveling waves, and those waves, they actually are observable by brilliant light scattering if we use such sophisticated wave vector resolution techniques. And those modes, they do transfer angular momentum across the film thickness, which can be used for future Spintronics applications. So that, well, the areas of applications, that's already up to engineers right now. So with this, I would like to also acknowledge my colleagues who contributed to this experiments and theory. So as I told at the beginning of the work, these experiments has been done in Kaiserslautern in the group of Burkhard Hillebrands, and theory for these waves has been developed by a group of Andrei Slavin and Vasil Tiberkevich in USA in collaboration with the PhD student in Kazachstan, Halina. She did a lot for calculating those modes and describing the spin currents. And the sample was kindly provided by scientific research company Karat by Ihor Syvorotka. So I'm very grateful that we got that high quality examples from him. So I would like to acknowledge all the funding here from DFG and Spin Plus X and ERC grants, as well as Optimus Center here. And with this, I would like to conclude my talk and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for the very interesting talk. So this talk is open for questions. If you're in Zoom, please use the raise hand function. If you're on Twitch, please just type your questions in the chat box and I'll read it for you. All right, I can ask the first question. Just purely from a geometry point of view, what you have discovered, what do you call the transverse spin current generation in YIG? Is it something very similar to like the planar Hall effect? It feels to me that you have a spin wave propagating in plane. If the magnetization is exactly in plane, you don't see anything. Once the magnetization starts to tilt, have an angle, then you start to have the perpendicular flowing spin current.
Yeah, it looks rather similar, but it has different symmetry as a planar Hall effect. So that's not a planar Hall effect, although it looks similar. So this effect just comes from the breaking of the symmetry. So between two waves which constitute the mode profile for the wave, because we have always in such a film when we consider just wave which propagates along its plane, for every wave we have that eigenmode formed by two waves with opposite and equal group velocities propagating across its thickness. So let me just go back here. So to the, where is that slide? Right here. So every mode is consisting just two partial waves here. And these two partial waves, for the case of just perfect in-plane configuration, they are perfectly the same and propagating in opposite directions. In the case of oblique magnetization, we still have them taking the group, their group velocity is opposite. The slopes are opposite. So they take in energy in opposite directions. That's what keeps the wave basically in the film and propagating along its plane. But across the thickness, there is nothing propagating. Although because we have the same wave number direction for those waves, they carry the angular momentum in one direction anymore. So it's very way different from the planar Hall effect, where you have sort of scattering events happening. Here, there's nothing, no scattering, nothing like that. No force existing.
I see. Thank you. And just want to ask a quick follow-up questions. And you were saying that the symmetry is different from a planar Hall effect. I just want to ask specifically what difference there is. If the magnetization is, let's say, tilt a little bit upward versus the tilting downward, I suppose the generated spin current is reversed.
Yes.
And
Yes.
what about the excitation? So in your proposed experimental demonstration, you have one antenna on one side to drive the backward volume wave, backward volume wave.
Yeah.
If you put the antenna on the other side, kind of reverse the propagation direction, will the transverse spin current also be reversed?
If the wave propagates in opposite direction, yes, it's completely symmetric.
Okay, so if that reversed, also the transverse is also reversed.
Yeah.
I see. Thank you. We have one question in the group chat, so let me just read that to you. What is the direction of the spin moment of the spin current?
So the direction of the spin moment is basically this. It's basically we can just. Of course, for this term, we just consider the direction here. Direction in the that's a just dynamic spin here. The equilibrium position of the spin is along the internal field. It's completely along the field. So if you just take this basically any Landau-Risch's equation, so that will give us equilibrium position along the field. So that will be the direction of the spin. The dynamic component, they are considered perpendicular to that spin. So that's a direction. So of course we need to always consider the projection if you want to extract the final spin current, right? And here we consider the projection along the film normal for that.
Thank you. So this is like similar to the spin pumping, right? So you have a DC component and the AC component for the spin current. Yes. Okay, thank you. And I think Dr. Hillebrands has a question. Would you please unmute and ask it?
Yes, Dima, very nice talk. I think the essence of the results you have achieved is really that you have a new symmetry breaking mechanism, which is a new spin current. On the other side, the symmetry is not broken for the energy flow, as you were stating in the initial part of your talk. Do you have any feeling why that is, and how this kind of specific symmetry breaking mechanisms in the dynamic regime where you actually are could be harvested for other applications?
So in general, since that will work in principle for any system, it can be harvested. For instance, if we consider not only out of plane magnetization, but if we tilt just magnetization in plane, but consider the waveguide along which propagation takes place, and we just tilt the magnetization not out of plane but in plane. That geometry should also produce sort of spin current, but already running along the film plane, but perpendicular to the wave propagation direction. So in that way, this thing can general formulas can be applied to various systems, not always magnetized out of plane in this case, and that can produce like a transfer of spin, which will depend on the wave propagation direction. So sort of unidirectional coupler or unidirectional detector of a spin. So that sort of thing. For the second part of your question about the actually absence of energy flow, yeah, that still puzzles me, to be honest. I have feeling that the absence of energy in this case, it's rather thing which happens automatically, which will happen in any case, because that's the eigenmode of that. And if we are not transferring any energy energy along without any spin sinks. That gives us a very nice opportunity to save up the energy, do not have any losses in this case. So if you do not put a spin sink like platinum on top, we don't have we don't have energy flow into that, and we don't have energy flow associated with the with our unconventional spin current as well. So all of it will lead to just twist of the sample. It will just
I'm asking for the very fundamental background, symmetry background. Of course, energy flow is proportional to the square of the amplitude of any excitation. And spin flow is probably only proportional to the amplitude and not to the square of the amplitude. So that might be one reason. But my question to you is simply, do you see a more fundamental reason behind this asymmetry?
Well, basically the very, very fundamental thing, that's the origins of this symmetry breaking, that's dipole interaction, which is intrinsically non-reciprocal in that sense. So basically that's dipole interactions here. They're bringing this asymmetry. And up to now, dipole interactions were not considered as great symmetry breakers. Well, except of edge modes or something like that. So that brings significant breakthrough into the understanding of this dipole interactions. So they bring chirality. So up to last decade, people were not considering the surface waves, for instance, which are already symmetry broken. They were not considering that in that sense, but the essence of that surface waves, they are symmetry broken because of the dipolar interactions. That's what they are. So and that the whole purpose of this work is basically to attract attention to this breaking symmetry breaking mechanism using dipolar fields.
Thank you.
Dr. Yakomilev, you have a question?
Hi, very nice talk. I'm very happy I spent some time listening to you. You kind of intimated at one point in passing that there is here a cousin of, let's call it a cousin of the Einstein, the Haas effect, since you mentioned that maybe the mechanical moment could be measured, because apparently from the equation you showed the sum of the two will be 0. But since you have established everything you need to establish, what would one gain if one is to set up such a mechanical experiment?
So that's just a way of detection. So basically, in this way, we can actually decouple the exchange and mechanical degrees of freedom. So basically, we can separate the dipolar term, pure dipolar contribution, and pure exchange contribution of the wave in that experiment. That of course, at this point, it has fundamental interest. But from the point of practical applications, for instance, that can be in quantum experiments where we can perform experiment in the quantum limit, where the mechanical noise in the system will be much less than the actual excitation. So even the single magnon, we can decompose its exchange and mechanical parts in just in such experiment with implying quantum mechanical coupling between spin mechatronics, basically.
If I may ask something in addition to this, sure. Actually, I was inspired by what Professor Hillebrands was asking, and combined with my question, which I had while I listened to him. So the Einstein, the Haas, and related effects, I think there is little doubt that at the bottom of that is spin lattice coupling, which will then translate in our language here into spin orbit coupling. And then that really becomes a big question. Now, if the effects you're talking about derived from dipole-dipole interaction, as you responded to him, then this is then another class of Einstein-de-Haas experiment, so to say. So maybe it's a second cousin. That's just a remark. Obviously, I cannot expect an answer to that.
Well, technically, yes, because here in this calculations, in all this theory, we were not considering any damping. So any direct translation of spin waves into the lattice, like irreversible translation of any irreversible effects, we were not considering that. So indeed that's a new type of physics here.
Thank you.
Thanks for this question.
I think in the chat, Dr. Angela Walker has a question. What are the faint features at 15 and 20 wave numbers on the non-tilted sample? I'm not exactly sure which slide that is. Do you happen to know, Dmytro?
For the non-tilted. Oh, okay. Probably you are talking about the. Let me just go back quickly to the experiment. To the clean experiment without anything. So probably that's this case, right? That's this.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, so around this angle, so there are some artifacts. For instance, these like slight signals. So they are corresponding to the phononic spectrum of surface waves in dielectric mirror, which we use as a component of our system. So basically that's just artifacts. Then considering the change variations in the brightness here of the curve, that is referred to the parasitic interference of the light on the parallel plate, which is formed by a Yig sample. So Yig is grown on GGG. GGG is transparent. So, but anyway, that's grown in very nicely polished parallel plate, which is transparent for the light. So because of the reflections between those surfaces, which are parallel, we have some Newton interference between, and we see some artifacts of that, because at some point there is just interference which decreases the efficiency of a scattering. So we simply don't see their nice signal. So that can be overcome by carefully selecting, maybe polishing the surface a bit at tilted angle, so that that interference effects, interference fringes, which we see here, won't affect our measurements. But that was not the case for this sample which we measured.
Thank you very much for the answer. My Zoom is freezing, so I don't know if there's anyone is raising hand at this moment.
Well,
there's no one, Shin.
No. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Let me see if anyone has a question on Twitch. No, looks like we have exhausted all the questions. In that case, I want to thank you very much for the presentation. And if you have further questions, stay tuned. After we turn off the recordings, we'll give you time to ask more questions.